So, this is the year God interrupted everything. If you're new here, which you probably are because this is only my second episode, I'm Ren-Nessa, and this is the story of how God is adding reach to my life. Today is June 1st, and I've been reflecting on just how much has happened in the last year. June 2025 was the month that I closed on my first home, and it was also the month that I was laid off. And somehow, it was also the month that I started looking at all the pain that I had carried for most of my life without even knowing it had a name. Months later, I realized that God was interrupting everything that I had built without Him. He interrupted my survival, my silence, my false stability, and all my secrets. Then I started realizing that I had a part to play. I realized that there was reach required of me. There was reach required in my healing, in my honesty, in my surrender, and in my obedience. There's reach required in the way I saw myself and in my knowing of who God is. And honestly, I'm still becoming. Before all of this, I had built a life that looked stable. I was the A student, the overachiever, the one who worked hard, got degrees, got good jobs, and created stability for herself. From the outside, it looked like discipline. It looked like ambition. And it looked like I was being responsible. I had no idea that overachieving had become a trauma response. I thought I was just quiet and I preferred to stay by myself. But really, I was disconnected from myself and almost everyone else. I had learned how to achieve, but I had not learned how to feel. I learned how to survive, but I had not learned how to surrender. And not once did I do any kind of personal reflection to evaluate all the lies that I was living as truth. So I was what Jamaicans would call a barrel pitney. I was a child whose parents was overseas, sending things back home, but they were physically absent. My mom left Jamaica to provide for our family, and as an adult in the year of our Lord, I understand that. But as a child, I experienced her absence as abandonment. I don't remember when she left, and I honestly don't remember most of my childhood. I just knew that she wasn't there. And then came the divorce, which I realized I was angry about for at least 10 years, but no one else knew. I also carried pain from being separated from my dad. And when I realized that my mom was in America with both of my brothers, something in me interpreted that as abandonment. I remember I even texted my brother saying that you all abandoned me. I was probably like 12. So there was a lot going on, but I had no language for any of it as a child. There were also other wounds, like the rejection I felt from my sister, who wanted nothing to do with me. That just added to the list of things that I didn't know how to explain. And so I carried them quietly. And because I had no language for it, I built a life outrunning it. For years, I thought stability was the goal. A good job, a steady paycheck, get some benefits, have a good title, get a good 9 to 5. It was a predictable path. It was a life that looked secure. And I had it. I had 2 degrees. I had, good career experience. I had a good job. I even had an office with my name on the door. So in my mind, I'm good. What else do I need? I needed God, but I had no idea. I went to church as a child because I had to. I went to church here and there as a college student. And then for the last several years, church was barely part of my life. Every time I would call my mom, she would say, "You need to go to church." And I would just laugh. I didn't really know God for myself. I was living in sin, silence, survival, and self sufficiency. And I thought I was living my best life. But really, everything I had never dealt with, spoken about, or even knew I was carrying was building up inside of me. One thing I learned is that pain that stays hidden does not disappear, it leaks. It shapes choices, it shapes relationships, it shapes appetites, and it shapes identity. And for a long time, I had no idea how much of my life was being shaped by things I had never healed from. Then God sent Raydeen into my life. And honestly, I fought her a lot. She would try to empower me, encourage me, challenge me, or help me see something differently. And most of the time, it either went in one ear and out the other, or I had some kind of rebuttal ready. I would say things like, that's just how I am. I would literally just resist everything she was trying to help me see, but she never gave up. Looking back, I can see how God was using her before I even had language for what He was doing in me. She kept speaking life to me. She was calling out things out of me that I couldn't see for myself. And at some point, I think she realized that she needed backup. And so she invited me to church. So in November of 2024, Raydeen invited me to 100 Women Praying. That night, her pastor, who was also now my pastor, Pastor Erica Lee, prophesied that my house was coming. So now I'm up there looking at this lady like, how did you know that? How did you know I'm trying to buy a house? I didn't say it out loud, but I was shocked. I had never met a prophet before, okay? I did not understand everything that night, and I didn't suddenly become a completely different person overnight, but something shifted. From that night on, I started seeing and feeling subtle changes in my life. God started drawing me. He started interrupting patterns. He started changing my appetite. He started softening places in me that had been hardened by survival. And what I know now is this: God had already started reaching for me before I even knew how to reach back. In 2025, I started going to church more faithfully, started changing the music I was listening to. I started changing, what kind of content I consumed. Basically, I just became more aware of what I was feeding my spirit. And some things started losing their grip. One of those things was weed. I never called it an addiction, it really was my solution. I remember one time I said to my friend, "Remember when I used to smoke weed?" And she was like, "Girl, no, you used to burn weed." And I'm gonna do a laugh because she was right. If I had a bad day, I would come home and roll up. If I had a good day, that was even better because I would reward myself with it. And in the words of Popcorn, weed was my best friend. It was my comfort, my reset, my reward, and my escape. And I didn't realize how much I had been using it to avoid feeling and to avoid being present. But the more I kept showing up in God's presence, the more He started to reveal things that I needed to give up. So a couple months go by, and it's now June of 2025, and I closed on my first home. It's a promise fulfilled. 3 weeks later, I was laid off. So the thing I had attached so much security to was removed. The 9 to 5 structure I trusted was shaken, and the job that made me feel safe was now gone. Around that same time, I started looking at the trauma connected to my mom leaving me in Jamaica. And so, yes, June of 2025 was a lot. It was a month of promise and pressure. It was a month of provision and loss. It was God showing me that He could provide, while also showing me how much of my identity had been built on things that could be shaken. God was interrupting the foundation that I had built without Him. So when I stopped working, I finally had time to look at myself. And this is when I started realizing I didn't know who I was. I knew how to work, I knew how to achieve, I knew how to produce, and I knew how to be dependable. I knew how to keep going, but I didn't know how to sit with myself. And I didn't know how to feel all the things that I had buried inside. I didn't know how to recognize the little girl in me who had been carrying abandonment, anger, rejection, and grief for years. I didn't know how disconnected I had been from myself. I had cut myself off from feeling so much of what I had gone through. And honestly, I think this is how I survived for a long time. But there comes a point where survival stops being enough. And where God says, "I'm ready to heal what you've learned how to hide." As I kept going to church, I thought I had surrendered everything. I changed the music I listen to. I don't watch that kind of content anymore. I'm showing up more, I'm praying more, and I'm just living my life differently. And then God was like, "What about that thing that you told no one about? The longest standing secret. The thing that I had not fully talked to Him about, the hidden sin, the hidden pain, the sexual brokenness, and the things that started when I was young that I didn't fully understand what was happening. The paths I went down, the things I buried, and all the things that I justified." the things I tried to move on from without bringing them into the light. That was the moment where I could no longer keep calling partial surrender obedience. God was asking for the truth, and the truth had a cost. It was painful. And so at 27, I started therapy. The past year required me to release more than I expected. I had to release years long friendships. I had to release old versions of myself. I had to release hidden patterns. And I had to release all the coping mechanisms that I had built. I had to release the illusion that I was fine because I truly was not. I had to release the belief that stability was only a job, a paycheck, or a plan. And I had to release the need to keep everything together on the outside while falling apart internally. The release was painful, but it was necessary. And so now I'm unemployed for about 9 months, honestly. And this is a side note because as I was writing the notes for this episode, I realized that I was unemployed for 9 months, a whole pregnancy. And then I birthed this podcast shortly after that. Y'all don't hear me though. I said I birthed this podcast shortly after that. Okay. So, yes, I was unemployed. But as Pastor Erica would say, I was crying with a loaf of bread under my arm. That loaf of bread was ad reach. I had something in my hands, but I was still afraid. God had already started building it, but I was still looking at the bills. I was still looking at what was due. I was still looking at the stability that I had lost. I was just looking in the rear view mirror. I was trying to figure out how to trust God when the numbers did not always make me feel like trust was the obvious choice. Because the truth is, having a business does not automatically mean you feel secure. If anything, I was more stressed because I didn't know what I was doing. Sometimes you can have the seed in your hand and still be scared because you don't know how it's going to multiply. That's a different type of fear. So that has been part of the stretching. God has been teaching me that outreach is something I have to build with Him. I have to seek Him for strategy, for revelation. I have to ask Him what He wants this to become. Who am I called to serve? What am I called to say? How am I called to move? What is the vision? What is the assignment? And what is the timing? And that has been truly humbling because AdReach is still evolving and I am still evolving. If you listen to episode 1, I talked about the cost of stability. That episode came from a revelation God gave me about how much I had been clinging to stability, even when stability had started shaping my identity. And honestly, I recorded that episode just a few hours after I woke up from a dream that really shook me. I call it my handmaid's tale dream. It made me look at stability differently, and it definitely made me value my freedom. It made me look at the systems that I had trusted and the systems that I was trying to go back into differently. And about 5 days after recording that episode in April of 2026, after being laid off since June of 2025, I landed a part time job. And that was a marker for me because by then, the job did not feel like my savior. It felt like God's provision. It felt like God showing me I can provide for you through work, through outreach, through community, through strategy, through obedience, through a bird, just all the ways that you couldn't even predict. And that revelation helped me receive the job differently. So, all in all, this year has been very interesting, and I'm still getting to know myself. I'm still learning who I am outside of achievement, outside of survival, outside of performance, and outside of sin. Just outside of who I became to survive what I did not understand. And so, yes, I'm still learning myself in God, and He has been teaching me that my voice matters. And that's why you're hearing it right now, because I wouldn't do this by myself. And so these days, you'll find me laying a new foundation. Shout out to Pastor K and Erica Lee and Echo Community Church, because they have helped me come out of hiding. They help me stay planted and encourage me to keep showing up while God works on me. I realize that healing does not happen in isolation. And so God sends people, community, and covering to help rebuild what we didn't even know was broken. And so when I think about outreach now, I see it differently. I used to think about it mainly through the lens of skills, strategy, content, marketing, and creativity. But now I understand that outreach is connected to my story, my healing, my voice, and my obedience. Outreach is more than a business idea to me now. It's something that God has been using to teach me to trust Him. That is the reach required of this season. God is stretching my faith and my capacity. He's stretching my ability to believe what He placed in my hands has purpose. Outreach is going to be great because God is forming the woman who has to carry it. He's healing my voice, He's refining my motives, and He's teaching me obedience. He's shown me that provision doesn't always come through the structure I was used to. Sometimes provision looks like a loaf of bread under your arm before you even realize you have something to feed from. So a year ago, I thought stability meant having the house, the job, the income, the plan, and what you would think is the full structure. But now I'm learning that real stability begins with God. A job can change, income can shift, relationships can change, old identities can fall away, and our plans can be interrupted. But God is my ultimate security. So as I come into June again, I'm looking back at the year God interrupted everything that I had built without Him. He interrupted my survival, my silence, my false stability, my hidden pain, and my secrets. He interrupted the version of me that knew how to achieve but didn't know how to be whole. And I'm still becoming. I'm still learning my voice. I'm still praying, Lord, help my unbelief. And I'm still learning who I am in God. I'm still healing and I'm still rebuilding. And this is part of the story of how God is adding reach to my life.